Luke, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah.
To get started, I always like to just hear a little bit about the person I'm interviewing because it's always good to, I can make some assumptions on who you are based on what I can see. But how would you like people to understand who you are, what you do?
Okay. In terms of who I am, I want people to know that I'm somebody that cares. I want people to know that I'm somebody that actually has good interests for other people and wants other people to win.
Okay.
Okay. The reason I say that is because, of course, what I do is sales training, sales coaching, sales consultancy. And I think one of the things that people often confuse with salespeople when they hear that name, sales or sales rep or something like that, often what comes to mind for people is they have this idea of this old-fashioned car salesperson who's going to try and rip them off.
Yeah.
And so for me, I all of the type of selling that we train is ethical selling. It's all focused on the person that you're speaking to. It's about getting to know them, understand them. So that's why I say I want people to know that I care and I actually have the best interest for other people.
Mm. I think how you started that, I might have assumed therapist and me. But I totally get it because you're absolutely, there is that reputation, isn't there? So how does that differ then from where do you think that reputation comes from with sales having a bad rep, and how do you approach it differently? Is it a different approach, or is it more of or is it just a different set of rules that you try to educate people on?
Yeah, I think it is a different approach. So I was quite fortunate really to have a lot of training when I first got into corporate selling. And thankfully, I worked for some big companies that did have those values where they understood that to have longevity in relationships and winning new business, you had to do it. It had to be focused on them. So I think that the reason I feel confident that it's more about focusing on the other person than yourself is that one, it's been trained in me since I was in my early 20s, and all the way through to my leadership style with managing big sales teams and departments. All of that has really helped me to get to know people and understand what they want and what their needs are. And I think that when somebody has the ability to take themselves out of the equation and actually focus on the person in front of them, they can actually reach them more. The rapport's higher, the trust is higher. And so there is a different focus because most people will be focused on, right, let's close the business right now. Let's find a way to get it. And there's an element of, yes, as a business, you need to do that. But in order to get there in the best possible way, you first need to know the person in front of you.
Mm. Tell me a little bit more about what got you to this point in your career. Like, where did your early start come from, and what led you to want to try and do your own thing as well?
Okay, sure, yeah. So, I didn't go to university. I left sixth form because I was not getting on with it at all. And my first ever job was actually working for a steel stock holding business. So I don't know if you've seen that video, like steel poles, essentially. That's what it is, steel bars. And I know how to weld, and I know how to use a crane. Really random and weird skill sets that have no use to me now. And I then ended up working in the office as almost like an internal sales person. And I ended up working for their sister company that do architectural cladding and things like that. So, like when you look at any high-rise building in the UK, often they'll use glass, but some will use some types of external cladding that will go onto the building. And my first ever sale was to Fulham Football Club. We met with the architect, and at the time it was when they were in the Premier League. Not this time, but the time before, and they were going to expand their Riverside stand, and they were going to have external cladding all outside. That was my first ever sale, and it was six figures, and I was like, wow, this is really exciting. and they got relegated, so they cancelled the project. But still, the feeling that I got off it was really good, and I ended up working in engineering for a little bit, in sales. I had to make cold calls to businesses up at the North Sea, and they had strong Scottish accents. And you wouldn't really be able to tell. There's a few words, but I had a bit of a black country accent back then as well. And so they could tell that I was not from Scotland. So it was a real challenge, obviously, just cold calling, never meeting these people, and trying to get our engineering products into that. So that was really, really tricky, and that's the first time where I really, really understood the fear of rejection and what that was. You know, every single day I was driving to Wolverhampton from where I lived, which was Wombourne, and always on the drive there, I'd be feeling sick, and I'd be like, "Oh man, what am I doing with my life? What on earth is this? I should have just stayed at sixth form and gone to university. What am I doing?" And yeah, eventually over a period of time, you just build a resilience to the fact that, yes, I've got to make 80 phone calls or 100 phone calls today, and I'm probably going to get told 95 times. And getting used to that was really helpful to me, because I then decided to set up my own lead generation business. So I must have been maybe 19, just about to turn 20 at that time. And I joined some networking groups to grow that, and the business was successful. And when I was going to get married, my now wife was absolutely determined for me to go and get a corporate job so we could get a mortgage, and I listened to her. And I don't regret that, because the skills I learned actually in the corporate world has helped me to be who I am today. And I ended up working for a huge organization called Lyrico. So they do like workplace products, stationery, things like that. And I must have been the youngest by at least 10 years in that sales organization, that hundreds of salespeople. And that was where I really learned how to prospect, and I mean properly, how to conduct a discovery meeting, how to do a quote, and how to close business. That's where I really understood that skill set, and it was a really successful period for me. I ended up getting promoted and having my own team. I then moved to another large French organization, and essentially had like this sales department, really. And we took that team from £500,000 to £8.2 million in about 18 months. And that was from all the things that we talk about now. So how I ended up with what I'm doing today is really, I've done every single sales role, from an entry-level telesales role, which is focused on prospecting and getting out there, all the way through to a senior sales leadership role, and I've done everything in between. So, funnily, most people confuse what I do with business coaching, and it's actually a million miles away from that in some ways, because I'm never going to show you how to exit a business. I'm also not going to show you how to do accountancy or organization, because I'm hopeless with those two things. But my skill set is niched in sales. And so for me, with what I do now, and the reason I do that now is because I've seen in the corporate worlds, in small businesses, in medium-sized businesses, every single sales role that you could possibly have, especially around new business development. And I've got that skill set that I can now provide to others.
So who do you typically work best with? You've mentioned there's a bit of a range there. Is that do you focus on the range that you can go for, or do you try to target large companies where you're enriching an existing sales team, for an example?
Mainly solo entrepreneurs and small business owners, actually.
Okay. So where do you think most of these people struggle? Because I think what's interesting about what I've just gathered from what you're saying, I think from my own experience and people I've spoken to, I think it's when you first get into it, it's understanding there's a big thick line between marketing and sales. But some of the role, now that you hearing you speak, then it's making me think like at least one of those activities of like a cold call, that feels like the line there is slightly blurred between sales and marketing because you're almost marketing directly the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Where do you think a lot of these people struggle? Like if you could offer like one really solid nugget of wisdom to people listening to this, where do you think a lot of them struggle? That if they changed one action, potentially, they would benefit from that.
It would be dealing with the fear of rejection. That could be from a cold calling point of view. That could be from a networking point of view. That could be even from a lead coming through to me, and I need to somehow convert this into a paying customer. Every single person has the fear of rejection. They have the fear of failure. They have the fear of success. Everyone has it to a certain extent. And it's having the ability to overcome those that make the big difference. So if we stick with the fear of rejection for a moment, so that's a very, very real thing. And in fact, I've got a client who's I think he's out prospecting today actually, and I'll share the story. So when I first started working with him, he was terrified of cold calling, and the idea of it was like, Luke, there's no way you're going to get me to go out and do door-to-door prospecting for my business, B2B prospecting. And as normal, I go, okay, that's fine. But I quickly realized for his industry in particular that B2B face-to-face prospecting would make a huge difference for his organization. So we went out together as something that I can offer with what I do. And I said, right, okay, we're going to go out this morning. We're going to go to 10 businesses, and we went through what you're going to say, and we had all of that planned. And we went out, and the first place we were going to go into, it was almost like he was shaking in the car. And he was embarrassed because he's like a strong character, he likes to come across that way. And he was so nervous. And as we went to walk up to the door, his hands were shaking. He was holding like some marketing material to make him feel safer, so he could just give it to them. And he knocked on the door, and a human came out and spoke to him. And unfortunately, the person he wanted to speak to wasn't there. But he walked out, and he said to me as we were walking back to the car, he goes, Luke, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I said, I know, James. I know it's not going to be. I know that's the case. I said to him as soon as we got in the car, the hardest door, if you're prospecting this is face-to-face, the hardest door that you'll ever go through is your own car door. You first of all got to drive to the place that you're going to. That's a real effort. Then you get to the estate or the office complex or wherever it is, high street. And then you've got to get out of that car and you've got to go and speak to the first person. And so my best piece of advice for that, in terms of as a small nugget of advice, is to not look at your phone, not look at your laptop, not look at your tablet. And as soon as you get there, walk out the car and just start walking towards the first place. And in your mind, just have this idea that, okay, the first 2 or 3 I can mess up anyway, because they're probably not going to go very well. But what happens is when you're prospecting, this also works when you're on the phone as well, is when you're prospecting, once you get through the first few, you start to realize, oh, it's not so bad. If you're an extroverted personality, you actually start to really enjoy it, because you're like, wow, I'm getting to speak to people. Maybe not everyone's saying yes, but there's so many friendly people out there, I can go and speak to them. And for the introverted personality and types, again, there's almost like there's a process that you go through, and you're realizing, okay, I'm achieving my strategy here, because if I've said in my head, I'm going to go and speak to 10 businesses today, and I'm going through those motions and I understand what my conversion rate should be in principle, then from the introverted perspective, they're getting something from it, because they're actually overcoming their fear and they're actually achieving the numbers that they've set out to do.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So from an extroverted point of view, you've got this social element to it. And from the introverted perspective, you've got an overcoming procrastination perspective. And so coming back to the point is that if you are going to do B2B prospecting, you either just have to pick up that phone and make the first few phone calls, or you drive to wherever you got to get to. You do not look at your phone. You just get out. And even if you've forgotten everything you're going to say, you just turn up and just mess it up, because the first few you've got to mess up anyway.
So the key with B2B in particular, then, it is just having that conversation, that opportunity to speak, because this is one of the I network, as you know. For me, and I think other people that network say this as well, it's unrivaled in the way that you can build rapport with someone.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge is, like, from my own personal experience and also people that I work with, from a B2B perspective, it's not B2C, where you've got more abundance of opportunity coming to you inbound, easier. B2B, it's people who are probably not looking for it, but if you strike up the right conversation and identify what their pain points are, and you've got the right value to offer, the service will often just sell itself. So that approach, would you always advise it has to be more direct, in particular with like B2B, would you say?
Not always. Every single business will have a different way of getting business. And when I'm talking about from a sales point of view, for some businesses, face-to-face prospecting is not suitable. For some, phone calls are not suitable. For some, networking is not suitable. So it's understanding, okay, where do my target audience live and how do I get in front of them? And so, if you've got a very niched service, as an example, probably finding businesses in your local area to go and see them face to face, it's unlikely. So probably phone calls or exhibitions are more likely to be better places for you to go and find opportunities. Whereas if you've got a service that can be used by every business, then yeah, absolutely, face-to-face could 100% work. And I think from one thing I've learned since taking this on is that it's underutilized massively by solo entrepreneurs and small business owners. And if they just applied that one thing of, even if it was 10 doors a week, you go to one client and you notice they're on an estate, you think, okay, why don't I go to two of the businesses on here and just say, oh, just been to see DGS, for example. I've just been to see them. This is what I'm doing. What is it you do for, if it would talk about video for video, for me, it would be what you're doing for your sales training of your staff.
One thing that's coming to mind with everything you're saying, it's reminded me of a conversation I was having yesterday where we were talking a little bit about imposter syndrome, which, would you say a lot of what, because I think what's interesting about what you're saying about it is you're not really necessarily focusing on your processes suck or you're approaching the wrong people per se. It's you're battling yourself to overcome those challenges. How do you think, like, really all of that ties into that sense of imposter syndrome? Because again, I'll speak from my personal experience. I think it's a buzzword you hear a lot, but you don't necessarily recognize when you're actually facing certain challenges until it's right in front of you and you're forced to confront it.
Yeah, I would say imposter syndrome plays a big part in it. I think we've all got these sets of beliefs that we've taken from when we're kids, and then when we've been teenagers, and it's been based on the friends that we've got, parents as kids, and the decisions that we've made in our adulthood that has directed us to go down a certain path. And what comes with that are all these set of beliefs that we've inherited from other people that we've met. Some of those are great, and some of those are disempowering as well. And a lot of those, coincidentally, can be really challenging to overcome. And especially for business owners where they're almost the first of their generation trying to get out there, trying to make a difference, because they may not have seen a huge amount of role models growing up to know how to behave, how to think, what to say even. And those set of beliefs can be really difficult to overcome. But I know without any doubt that if you only change the self-limiting beliefs that you had, that would make more difference to your business than any strategy or idea or external lead generation company or whatever. I absolutely know that the thing that makes the biggest impact on people is self-limiting beliefs. And having the ability to overcome those makes a huge difference. Because even if you're not thinking about it consciously, even if you went out and prospected or you went to a networking event, subconsciously that story is playing. And so not being able to kind of bring that out and realizing, oh my life, I can't believe I believe that. You're not able to change and shift that. And when people feel confident and they have conviction about what they're offering and they have absolute total certainty that what it is I've got to offer is going to help you so much, when somebody has that, people buy. And so really it is overcoming imposter syndrome in many ways, but it's uncovering what the self-limiting beliefs are that's stopping somebody from being able to prospect or pick up the phone and follow up on an opportunity or ask for the business. All those things, those fears and the nerves that we have is just the self-limiting beliefs that are playing on in our subconscious mind, and it's telling our gut, right now you should feel nervous.
How you introduced yourself is making a lot more sense now. I've spoken to a number of different sales professionals, taken part in different courses and training, and typically the focus is on the processes, how to structure the message, how often to follow up, how to track it in sheets, for example. But I can see where you're coming from, because you're absolutely right. It's one thing to have all of the methods, but when it comes to actually putting it into practice, if you're in the way of yourself and you uncover that there's actually some lack of confidence in the value of your service, because that's part of the mindset, isn't it? When you're shaking to get out of the car, in the back of your mind, you're maybe thinking, oh, this person's not going to like it, I'm wasting their time. But it's having that conviction that this actually has value to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's is the main method to get over this fear as simple as you've just got to do it, and unfortunately you've just got to bite the bullet and experience the discomfort, because on the other side of that discomfort is what we want to achieve? Or is there affirmations you can just say to yourself every morning in the mirror?
It's a really great question. Just doing it is a way, but it's not the only way. So the reason it's a way is because when you're trying to overcome a self-limiting belief, what you're doing by taking action is you're questioning and challenging that belief system. And if you go and prospect, let's say, every week, and you've done 10 or 20 doors in that week, and you do that consistently, you're going to get business off the back of it. You are. And let's say every single week you're starting to build your pipeline, and at the end of the month you've realized, oh, I've made X more sales this month compared to the previous month. Then that achievement and that feedback starts to go into your mind, and you start going, actually, this does work. I can do it. Okay, and that makes a difference. So that is a way of being able to overcome these self-limiting beliefs. One of the best ways to do that, though, is by thinking. Now, you can do that through coaching, or you can speak to another coach, or you can do it through therapy. It's funny you mentioned therapy at the start. It's off topic, but I will come back to what we're talking about here. Is a lot of people, when they have their first coaching session with me, they'll often say, and that felt like a therapy session, weirdly. It's quite funny you brought that up. Anyway, the thing I was saying was that you don't necessarily have to have somebody to do this. I'd rather give you, and obviously those that will watch, the skill set to do this for themselves. So the first thing is to identify what the self-limiting belief is. So that could be sorry, man. It's okay. We might need to edit that bit out. I don't know if it's one of my daughters.
So we can chop it up. But, do you need to get the door?
No, I don't think so. I think it's one of my nieces. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, talking about self-limiting beliefs, one of the the first things that you can do is to actually uncover what it is. So let's say your focus is on prospecting, or in fact, let's move away from prospecting for a moment. Let's say it's asking for the business. So you've been through the whole process, you've understood their needs, you've presented a solution to them, you've offered a proposal or a quote, and the only thing to do now is to follow up and ask for the business. And you get that sick feeling before, because you're like, it looks so lovely in my pipeline. What if it doesn't come up? That fear, something is going on subconsciously in your mind. So sitting down and asking yourself the question, it might sound negative, but it will actually help in the long run, is I can't ask for this business because. And whatever comes after that, if you say that to yourself and you're asking yourself that question, whatever the story is, or whatever the sentence is, or whatever picture comes into your mind, that's the self-limiting belief there. So some of the things you can then do to try and overcome that is something called interrupting the pattern. So interrupting the pattern is like, imagine you've got a record player and you're putting this record on top of it, and the record plays and you get the sound, and as you should, because it's the record. Interrupting the pattern is taking that same record, taking something sharp, scratching it in such a way so that when the record plays, it can't play the same way that it did before. That's what interrupting the pattern is. So you need to do something that's quite unique, off the cuff, unusual, that is stronger than the emotional impact of that self-limiting belief. So some things that some people will do is, and I've done this with some of my clients, is we've actually replayed experiences, but we've changed aspects of it. So this sounds really silly, so one of my clients, really nervous about going to talk to people that were older than him, because he had an experience when he was 16, 17 of really embarrassing himself when he was trying to give a product to them for his dad. So that somehow got into his head, older people think you're an idiot. And he believed that was his belief. So what we did is we replayed that moment, but we actually kind of had a lot of fun with it, made it silly, made it fun. And he went to give the product to this guy and his trousers fell off. He then did it again, but this time he was super small and he could actually fit this guy in his hand. He did it again and his brother came along and saved him and knocked it out of the hand before he gave it to him. Now this might seem really unusual, but what it does is that when he replays that thought, as long as he's done something that's really unique and really does interrupt the way that he used to perceive that experience, he'll now think of the silly thing, which interrupts that old pattern of behavior. Another way is to just simply look at the belief, if you've had a chance to write it down, and go, does that even make sense? Yeah, does that even make any sense to me? Why do I believe that? And you can go back to when you were 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, a couple of years ago for some experience. Like, this is so random. Why does this relate to what I'm thinking about here? You're interrupting that pattern of behavior. Now, it's not enough just to interrupt that old pattern of behavior. You need to replace it with an empowering emotion instead. So if you have gone through those first 2 steps right, where you've identified exactly what that self-limiting belief is, and you've interrupted the pattern in an appropriate way, you then want to create a new belief. So if we go back to the example we're talking about, which is, I want to close this business. I can close this business because, and whatever comes into your mind, that needs to be the new empowering belief. Now, how do you cement that so that it is a subconscious belief for yourself in the future? Well, what you do is you put yourself into a peak emotional state, and in the moment when you have the peak of that emotion, empowering emotion, you then state that emotion and you do something unique. Such as, it could be anything. It could be I'm patting my arm. It could be I'm squeezing the nail into one of my fingers. It could be that.
So you program that, so next time you need to feel that, that's the trigger.
Exactly.
It's really interesting because I believe everyone, whether that's for sales or just generally for themselves, even like more importantly communication, everyone should have a basic understanding of human psychology. More importantly, how our own minds work.
Yeah.
Because I think everything you're outlining there clearly defines the fact that our brains work against us. Our brains are there it's programmed to protect us in many ways, keep us safe. But as a byproduct of that, it also keeps us locked into these triggers of negative beliefs that maybe came from a less pleasant childhood experience. And it's reminding me of when you're trying to work on these things. I can't remember where I heard this from, but you've almost got to view yourself objectively and be able to see yourself from a bird's eye view. Because, so for example, conversation I was having yesterday about creating content, why people don't post content, where they fall short of doing that. You've got to schedule time with yourself, like anything else in the business. If you know you've got to do something, so let's say it's making content to grow the business, you've got to schedule time with yourself in the same way as if you've scheduled a meeting with someone. You're going to show up to that meeting because you don't want to let someone down. It's going to be bad for your reputation. You are doing that with yourself. You have to. But more importantly, the point I'm trying to make is, if you set yourself these goals, let's say it's you've got to go knock 10 doors. You've told yourself you're going to do it. If you don't do that, you're reinforcing that negative cycle in your brain, making it harder to then break it later. So that's also the challenge of, once you're ready to make that leap, you've got to go all in. Otherwise, you're going to be battling it further and harder. And it's an interesting challenge when you understand that that's how your brain's working. Because I think if you're blind to those facts, that's how we're all programmed. You're going to go through that process of really struggling, thinking, what's wrong with me? Absolutely nothing. But you don't understand how your brain's working. Great book, the Chimp Paradox, if you've ever read that, literally just talks about that. Like, you've got to view it as like a separate thing to you in a way, and understanding how it works, what its triggers are, and why it's making you feel that way is the route to understanding how to overcome these things. It's working with yourself rather than allowing it to work against you without you even knowing it's happening.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And it reminds me of a saying of an American, I suppose, coach in some ways, where he says that self-confidence comes from keeping the promises you make to yourself. I think that's the heart of what we're talking about here, is that really selling is about self-confidence. It's about conviction. Having that conviction that I know I can help you, and that I have something that's going to really help you to grow your business, or whatever the service happens to be. You can't give that if you don't feel it yourself. And so that conviction, that self-confidence comes from just doing the things that you said you were going to do. And if you do that consistently, you're going to feel more self-confident, and you're going to have that ability to reach somebody, and for them to feel, yeah, this makes so much sense to me. I need to buy this. And then they'll justify it with logic.
Anyways, just going to check this.
Okay.
About 15 minutes left on this one. So we are limited on time with how much we can discuss, and this is really interesting. I wasn't expecting us to focus so much on psychology. I'd say it's a bit of a hobby to study this thing because it's interesting. But for this episode, what I really wanted to try and focus on, two main things now, is your take on prospecting and like takeaways that anyone listening to this can take away and learn from, but also methods of, once you've got the target, how would we approach connecting with them? And let's do it from like a B2B perspective, because I'm interested in cold calling because it's got a bad reputation.
Yeah,
but it clearly still works, and especially for businesses, like, I think as long as you're not trying to sell anything that has a perception of being heavily scammy, that's something that's obviously built that bad reputation from years of that taking place, but also even if it's just approaching someone's door, what are those steps and what should you ideally come prepared with? So firstly, for starting off with prospecting, what are your approaches to prospecting? And I'll just give you a quick example of like someone else I previously spoke to, who I think I mentioned when we agreed to set up this conversation, was that everything I'd learned up until having that conversation was it's a volume game. It's all numbers. You've just got to hit the phone. You've just got to send as many direct messages as possible. I'd come away from that experience thinking, okay, well, surely I'm going to run out of people to do that to eventually. And surely if the success rate of doing that is so low as a strategy, is something I'm going to invest my time in, surely there's more efficient ways of doing it. And the conversation I had with that person, he said, he flipped it on its head. He said, if you focus more of your time on that initial prospecting, as you said, understand who they are, what matters to them, where you can reach them, you spend more of your time on that, which the trade-off then is you may have a smaller, or shall we say more condensed list, but then the byproduct of that is you've put that time in, sacrificed time that you may have spent on just calling blindly, shall we say. But as a result, you've got a list of people that you've already taken the effort to understand. And then when you reach out, you've got a much better understanding of who they are and how to connect with them. So I guess my question for you is, how does that align with your beliefs on that? And what should people think about, and like steps, shall we say, what are the key takeaways when prospecting? Because it also comes to making sure you're targeting the right industries and niche for your business. Because obviously you've got to make sure that they can afford your services, that there's a need for it as well. What's your approach when you're helping someone with prospecting?
So it's interesting. The first thing that you mentioned is the importance of knowing who you're speaking to. So the actual first step is looking at the past and going, okay, what's really worked? Who were the people that we served and why were they interested in what we do? So it could be that, for example, you could look at that and go, okay, so they are business owners. They are typically solo entrepreneurs. They turn over between 60 and 80,000 pounds per year. And one of the challenges that they have is they have no idea how to do social media. If I'm using an example, I don't know if that's the case, but let's just say that was the target audience. So if that's the target audience, you've already identified a lot of factors about that individual that you're trying to reach out to. And then it's understanding, okay, why did my best customers buy from me in the past? If there were 3 things that they really wanted to get out of it and they got, what were those things? Think about customers that came back a second time or a third time. Why did they come back? What was it about my offering or my service that made so much sense to them that they wanted to come back? And focus on those things. So, for example, if it's the sales coaching for me, so typically it's a solo entrepreneur or a small business owner that has a great product, a great service, but hasn't come from a sales background. They want to develop that mentality, that psychology, that skill set to develop their company, because they recognize, yes, like you've said earlier in this conversation, there's marketing and then the sales, and it's 2 very different things. So they really want to develop that skill set for the growth of their business. And the reason that our clients stick with us and they'll do a second lot of sales coaching, or they'll move to consultancy, is because they've improved their self-confidence. Because they're feeling more self-confident in themselves, their sales numbers are going up. I mean, we've got a client we're doing consultancy with now, been working with them for about 12 months. They went from 244,000 in sales revenue to 406 in 12 months. And he says that one of the most important factors was his own self-confidence. Opportunities just happened, things were converting, and he can't even logically explain why some of these things happened, but how he was feeling in here made the biggest impact on his sales revenue number. So we'll come back to the point. So for me now, I understand that when I'm speaking to my target audience, the things I need to focus on is self-confidence and how that conviction has an impact on sales revenue. Because that's the reason he's stuck with buying from me. So that's the starting point, is knowing your audience and knowing why they care. That's the starting point. Let's say it's prospecting, because you've mentioned prospecting now. So I'm now going to go out and prospect, and I'm going to knock on these doors, or I'm going to make these phone calls, or I'm going to this networking event. What do I say?
So I think one of the points, just to jump in slightly, my question was motivated more of thinking like building a list, let's say. What would you advise on pre-build your list, pre-vet? Because if we're doing, like, we're door knocking, you'd have a list, you'd have a good idea, but with networking, you never really know who you're going to meet.
Yeah.
Do you think, would you advise people to sort of invest their time into both of those things, a list as well as just being prepared to meet the right people?
I think so, yeah. I think there's all sorts of different strategies that you can do, and I think that especially for a new business that's starting off, or they're relatively young in terms of the age of the company, I think you need to just try different things and work out what works for your industry in some ways. For example, for me, the best way for me to generate leads and opportunities is from networking. Networking is the best for me. In fact, 80-90% of our business comes from networking now. So I know for me, it makes total sense, because my target audience are at these events. It makes total sense. I can have those conversations. I can build trust and credibility, which leads to one-to-one meetings. We discuss opportunities, which leads to customers coming on board. That's how it plays out for me. I would suggest trying different things. There's not just one size fits every single person, and there are so many different factors that go into it. So there's the industry itself that you're in. There's also who you are as well. You know, some people absolutely love networking. Some people detest it, but do it because they think they should. Well, that's probably a sign to think about doing it a slightly different way. So it's almost that you've got the personality of the individual, the service that they offer, the area that they live in, which will dictate a lot of these things. So I would suggest that you try different things and work out what's going to get you the opportunities that you want the quickest. And don't reject any possible way of getting those opportunities. You know, of course, marketing's a massive thing as well. I don't come from a marketing background, so I'm always going to be focused on sales, and I'll have that bias towards it. But who's to say that marketing can't work? Who's to say that social selling can't work? You know, there's all these different ways. So it can work. There are advantages to going for a volume-focused approach, which is, I've got a list of 1,000 people, and I'm just going to contact all of them. The advantage is you have less time on preparation, so you can get more activity done. But likewise, if you are more focused on who you can actually serve, and you're looking for those clues and hints from the activity I suggest at the start of this question, is you're speaking directly to the people that you know you can help, which can make the conversion rate of phone call or face-to-face visit to appointment much higher. So there are pros and cons for all things, and I don't think it's one way is the way. And I don't think people can say that anyway, because everyone has a different business.
So all that makes sense from the prospecting perspective then. I'm curious, cold calling is one. I want to focus on this because of, like I said, I think it's one of those things that if you've not done it, or you've not been in the space where you've needed to, or you've heard that it's like someone's maybe advised, just call the business is prospecting. That for me is like one of the biggest sort of like that I think I'd almost be more worried to do that than step out of the car and walk into the business.
Mm-hmm.
What should you go into that with prepared? Like, do you think there should be a strong script, which obviously has the risk of sounding very templated? And I think one other thing that comes to mind is there any harm or risk in just making that phone call off a personal number? Should you have a business number, for one example, which is obviously advised? Don't put your mobile number on your website, for example, so people come through what looks like a landline number. What are your thoughts on that as an approach? What if I'm stepping into cold calling for the first time? I'm absolutely bricking it. What should I go into that action being ready with?
So the first thing that you said was that you would be more apprehensive about making a phone call versus a face-to-face visit.
Mm-hmm.
The first bit of advice would be what we were talking about with the self-limiting beliefs is I'd explore why that's the case. And I'd be really curious to understand why it is that a phone call would be more scary than a face-to-face visit. Now, it's really funny. I'll share this story with you. So, my wife Jess, she hates making any phone calls, and you'd think as a sales coach I'd probably be able to help her, but she's not interested. She's like, Luke, do not use any of the, what you do here. So that's fine. But the reason that she feels so nervous making phone calls, even if it's to order a Chinese to anybody, is because she was doing work experience and she phoned up somebody and she called them Mrs. something. And the person on the phone responded to her by saying, I'm not a Mrs., I'm a doctor. So you'll refer to me as Dr. B.
Wow.
And she was really rude with my wife Jess on the phone. And so when we've explored and looked at this, that's the reason why. So from one phone call, the rest of her life up to now has been impacted by one thing that's happened. So when I'm saying to you about understanding why that's the case, if you have to really sit down and think about why is a phone call more scary than face-to-face prospecting, whatever comes to mind, that's the self-limiting belief.
Do you know what's really interesting? I like that example because my partner's the same. She'll avoid making a phone call at every cost. I'm fine with it. I love making phone calls weirdly because I feel like I'm pretty good at talking to people. I don't like to, toot your own trumpet too often, but that's one thing that I feel like I've developed a skill in. So I'll happily make the conversation, and usually I get a bit of banter going and get a bit of a rapport. So now that you point that out, it seems more foolish. Why is that something? Because if you ask me that, I think the limiting belief doesn't stem from the actual action of making the call. It's, for me personally, it's probably more the perceived experience of the person on the other end. I hate the thought of I'm inconveniencing people, or it's just going to be a nuisance to them. So maybe I'm worried about their response to it. But obviously that's the approach. Like, don't go hard on the sales really ever isn't the approach. You're asking questions. You're trying to get that information. But that's funny that you say that because I think that leaves me with more questions about sort of my own limitations with what is it about that? Because you used another example of someone who was concerned or more fearful of speaking to people older than them. That's always been comfortable for me. It's like, I think one of the reasons I enjoy networking is I've never had an issue being the youngest person in the room and trying to do it. So I think with cold calling then in particular, it's putting aside the sort of feelings and the limitations. What would you say if I'm going into that, let's say I'm still fearful and it's one of those things that I'm doing it, I know like that action is going to help me overcome that. What do you think, what would you advise someone go into that action prepared with? Should I have a script that I'm not going to deter from? Like I'm not going to venture off the track of that script. Should I, like, how much information should I have about their company? Should I have a really solid offer that I'm going to say to them? I'm going into that, I need to be prepared because I think that's obviously one of the fears people probably have is what if they ask me a question? What if I stumble and I sound like a fool? What do you think someone should go into that action with as a foundation with every conversation?
I promise I'll answer that question. There's one step before that, though. I just want to quickly look at if we can. Go ahead. So, one of the things that you said that was really interesting was that the self-limiting belief isn't the action itself. It's the other person's experience from having the phone call, and that it may be perceived as a nuisance. So there's two things I'd like to do just to explore that, because, by the way, everybody feels that way. So this is actually really good to focus on this for a moment. Is if you had something that made so much sense to someone and was going to solve everybody's problem, would it be a nuisance call?
No. And yeah.
So that's the belief idea that we want to have, and that's great in principle, but it's difficult in actuality when you're about to make the phone call. If you're like, what if this is a nuisance call? So the second part to this is, again, going through that challenge. So it's going, okay, why is this a nuisance call? Or actually changing that a little bit to go, why isn't this a nuisance call? Because I know if somebody was to have powerful video that demonstrates their business in such a way that brings on new clients for them, why wouldn't they use my service? And actually, if you start to reframe the focus of, I'm just calling this person because I want to get business to, I want to change this focus to, how can I really help this person? Because I know what I do is really good, and I know I can really help that person transform their business, because they've got no social media, they're doing no videos at all, and they could really promote their business and grow and expand and get more leads in just by using my service. They have to work with me. And this is where that self-confidence and conviction comes from again. Because if you are absolutely 100% certain that what it is you have to offer makes so much sense for the other person, they'll hear that enthusiasm on the phone and they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, you can come in. And honestly, it's ridiculous. So you ask about what to say and things like that. So I'm going to look at this slightly differently again. And it must be winding you up, so I'm really sorry with that.
No, it's fine. I think, I mean, I'll just be transparent with it as well. Like, yeah, everything you've sort of said has, I think, just in like the conversation I had yesterday, because I did another interview yesterday, it has sort of made me realize actually I am still sort of overcoming the challenges, that the limiting beliefs that were programmed into me when I was younger. So one of the things that sort of got to me when I was younger, because I went through a period when I was quite low in early years, which I'm sure a lot of people do. But one of the key things for me, which sort of held me back a little bit with my own confidence, was the thought that I didn't really have any value to offer to people, and that even just being in the same room as people was kind of like a bit of a nuisance, which is obviously, I've overcome that. I'm happy, I'm confident, but I think that's the thing that is still stepping in my way. And I think, yeah, I guess I know it's ridiculous. I know but it's like we were saying about the brain working against you. That's a trigger that's still programmed in me, that years later, after I've moved past all of that, grown beyond it, it's still there, triggering that kind of limiting belief. So I know where it's coming from, but I think I've found it challenging to just try and work past that, because it's such a point of challenge and discomfort.
Yeah. It makes total sense, and I would say that 99% of probably more percentage of business owners have the same thing. They do. It's the self-limiting beliefs that are holding us back from achieving the things that we want. And it's a Tony Robbins thing, I think this is, where it says that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is the BS story you tell yourself on a consistent basis.
I was thinking of one that I hate to quote him, but Will Smith, I think, said something like, "What we want is on the other side of discomfort."
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, okay. That is a good one. Yeah, okay. So I want to touch on something with phone calls, if I can. So, we've talked a lot about the self-limiting beliefs that we have and trying to overcome them. So you're about to make some phone calls, and yes, having an idea of what to say is really good. And I'd really recommend for anyone to watch the Simon Sinek video on YouTube, which is The Power of Why. It's a TED Talk. It's fantastic. And if you want to know how to structure a prospecting call, watch that video. It's really, really good. Excuse me. And what it is it's flipping the script. So most people will say what they do first, how they do it, and why that's important. That's their typical structure, which is, so if we use yourself, for example, it could be, I do videography. How I do that is I come onto site and we spend half a day or a couple of hours recording something that you want. And why that's important to you is because it's going to improve your marketing and your leads and your business, sales, revenue, etc. So that would be a typical prospecting call. What that video will show, and this is what we train as well, is to flip it in order. So it's to say to somebody, what we do is we help business owners grow their sales, increase their leads, and have opportunities to speak to their customers.
Sell the solution, not the service.
Yeah. How we do that is we come in for just a few hours. We record something for you to demonstrate your business of high quality. And what it is that we do, it happens to be videography. Now, that's the same information given in a different order. That's the only thing that changed there. I might have had a bit more enthusiasm for the second one, maybe, I don't know. But the point is just by flipping the order of the information that we're giving, it reaches the part of our brain that makes decision makings, our gut feeling, essentially. And starting with why is really powerful. But if those watching watch the Simon Sinek video on The Power of Why, they'll see all of this again. But I want to get back to our emotional states for a moment, because the thing that will have the biggest impact on cold calling is not words that you say, it's how you feel. So if you're challenging those self-limiting beliefs and you're trying to overcome them, and you do, and you follow that 4-step process I suggested by identifying the self-limiting beliefs, interrupting the pattern, creating a new empowering belief, and creating an emotion attached to it. Well, one of the ways that you can increase your emotional state is by changing your physiology. I'm sure you've studied psychology, you may have come across this before, but it's how you move will impact the way that you feel. It's the reason that tennis players, they knock the ball down a few times because they've trained themselves to get into a certain emotional state so that when they serve the ball, they're hitting it with more ferocity and more power. It can work for us as well. And I remember with my time at Lyrico, this might get me in trouble, but it's fine. The job was you went out and you did face-to-face prospecting. No phone calls, it was face-to-face. And I had this one territory which was between Leinster and Ludlow, and I was living in Bromsgrove at the time. And to get there was like an hour and 15, and there was very little opportunity. And so I made the bad decision to not go. And I thought, I'm going to make phone calls instead. And I thought to myself, right, if I'm going to make this work, because I want this to work, I'm going to have to be in such a peak emotional state when I'm making these phone calls that it's going to be difficult for the other person to say no. So how did I get into that peak emotional state? Well, the first thing that I did was I changed my focus. Some of the things we've talked about already. We could go into a lot more on that, but I won't for now because of the time we've got. But one of the other things that I did was I was just storming up and down my room, just charging essentially. And it seems really weird. And often when I tell people this, they're like, oh, okay. And then they're like, I'm never going to do that. But by doing it, we've got a wasp that's joined us. By doing it, and you okay with wasps?
Yeah. He might not be okay with me if he comes too close.
There are like sprays and things like that.
I'll just give him the back of the end.
Yeah.
I think he's taken the hint.
So yeah, let's getting back to this. So by charging up and down, it's going to change your behavior, and you can look at a lot of psychology and research that's been done in this area. Even if you were to stand like Superman for a period of a few minutes, increases the testosterone levels inside of you, right? So physiology can change how we feel, and actually the hormones that are going on in our body even. it's that serious. So one of the ways that you can put yourself into that peak emotional state is by moving in the way that you'd be moving if you felt that way. So by charging up and down, I would do that for a period of time. I would use something called incantations as well. And I mean, my wife used to think I was a real weirdo. But by the time I made that first phone call, I was so passionate, so enthusiastic, so much like in that space that when I made that first phone call, the person was like, I have to have a meeting with this person. And it wasn't that I was overbearing. It was just I was so enthusiastic about helping that person that it was difficult for them to not agree to be helped out.
I love that the phrase you used, incantations.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I pictured you as a therapist. Now I'm picturing you with a wizard's hat over a cold drink. You will buy it from me.
It's really funny, but I mean, so for example, for one of the training programs that we do, we often get feedback about the presentation. They really enjoy it, and they're like, "Don't you get like nervous when you're?" And I get terrified every single time. So that fear of rejection, it's very, very real. Fear of failure and all those sort of things. But I know how to change my emotional state. And so often what I'll do, especially if I'm in a training room and there's tables on, I'll charge around the room, and I'll be I might not use incantations if I'm in a public space. I should. That's what I'm training and teaching here. But I'll be focused on the things that are going to get me to be enthusiastic, to be passionate about what it is that I'm going to be doing. And that shift in emotion. So when I get into the moment, if I'm in that peak emotional state, I'm going to deliver something that is better for them. And that works for sales as well. Because when you're in that peak emotional state, when you're about to make phone calls, your conversion rate will be much higher than just saying the right things. Because our emotional state plays a huge part in our ability to sell and therefore in prospecting. It's quite funny when I go charge around the room. The last time I did that, some of the workers came in and they caught me and they were like, "What is it that you're doing?"
He's casting spells.
Yeah, it's so weird. But sometimes if you want to have different results to the average person and the normal person, you have to kind of do things that are unique and different. And so I believe in that. And I know from my own experience of selling, my own experience of leading salespeople, and now obviously developing business owners, sales for them. Well, they do it for themselves, but helping them to do that. Changing that emotional state will probably have the biggest impact on your conversion rate than any words that you could say.
And I'm satisfied with that because, as you could tell, I was fishing for like some steps and insights into like the process, more of the procedure behind it. But what you've actually given me is a much clearer insight. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but everything I've got from this conversation is that how you do it and the processes behind it are heavily seconded by how do you feel, so whether that's the person trying to grow the business themselves or the salesperson that you've hired to do it for you, their mindset, how they feel about the process and how prepared they are emotionally and everything, that is the most important thing with any of this, because the sale doesn't just come from having a great product or service. It's the energy that we're projecting into that and the confidence that we're giving that person, or not even giving the person the confidence in our service, but we're showing them how confident we are about what it is we think that they should purchase from us. Am I right?
Absolutely. Have you ever come across a trainer called Zig Ziglar?
Where do the name rings a bell?
Yeah, people recognize the name. He says that selling is a transfer of emotion. You cannot give that which you don't have. So that is the foundation of everything that we've spoken about there, is that really people buy from conviction of the other person being so confident that this is going to help them that they buy. And people buy with emotion first and they justify with logic second. I'd challenge anyone that's listening to think about what was the last thing that they bought and why did they buy it? But if I answer the question for myself, what was the last thing that I bought? The last thing that I bought was a hotel stay for our 10th year wedding anniversary, which was on Wednesday, but I bought it on Tuesday. Now, I booked the hotel that was the same place that we had our wedding reception. And if we wanted an overnight stay, we could have stayed anywhere, right? We could have gone to a Travelodge, we could have gone to an Airbnb, but we chose that place. Why? Because there's an emotional attachment to that place because it's where we had our wedding reception. That's the emotion. And I justify it with logic because, well, that's where we got married, right? It's 10th anniversary. It makes so much sense. And so if you really look through the detail for all our buying behavior, we'll see that 97% of the time, at least, that it's an emotional decision first. Even with things and services that we need, like accountancy, right? So a logical thing, we have to have it, but we choose the person that we get on with the most. It's an emotional decision first, and then we justify with logic based off our own values hierarchy and the belief systems that we have. So if that's the case, and people buy with emotion first, doesn't it make sense to manage our own emotions before having that conversation?
I think that's a great way to leave it.
Okay.
Couple questions then to finish off.
Yeah.
I'm curious, anyone listening to this who is interested to maybe work with you, learn a little bit more from you, what should they do? What would be ideal for you to connect with new people, maybe interested in either working with you or learning a little bit more from you?
Well, we've got some free training that people can get access to. So if they go onto our website, lukedanielsales.co.uk, they'll see that there's a free training offer, and that's from a launch event that we had back in May this year, 2025, and that is on how to follow up effectively without peeing off the potential customer. And so people can actually watch that training. It's just an opt-in, so it's just a name and email address, and then we'll bombard them with thousands of it. We won't really. We don't believe in that. But what it will be is it will give them access to free training that they can watch, and they can understand how to follow up effectively, how to understand something called Fibonacci sequencing, when it's appropriate, when it's persistence versus being pressuring, and the contrast between those two things. So people can get access to that training for absolutely free. At the end of that, we actually put a really good free offer for a training program of ours as well. So there's loads of free training that people can have that will really help business owners develop the sales skills that we've talked about today to help their business grow.
Amazing. And just final thought then, what can people maybe expect to see from you this year? What are some of the big goals that you've got for your business this year?
I've been really fortunate, and I'm grateful that people have come on board and trusted me to help them develop their sales revenue. I have that. So one of the big things for me is I shared an example of the client that went from 244,000 to 406,000. That's an amazing growth story, but we're now pushing that to get to the next level. And we're working with quite a few companies now on the consultancy aspect of my business. What I would love in the next year is to be able to have countless stories of businesses that we've worked with, that we've developed, that we've supported them in the growth of their business. And they're like, well, we've seen 6-figure growth in our organization over the last 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is. I will have countless examples of that. And when we have lots of examples of that, people will really start to realize, wow, okay, this could be something that really helps my business grow.
And I think that's a great place to leave it, Luke. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.